Howdy y'all, you got the Bulldog on the channel. What we got here today is a 2003 Ford F-150, 5.4 liter. And customer brought it in saying he's got a gigantic oil leak. It just pours out when you park on an incline. But it wasn't low on oil. We brought it in, when we went to jack it up, it just started pouring out over the top. And that didn't look like oil. That explains why it wasn't low on oil. It was low on antifreeze, however. Now, these things have a big valley in the motor down there. It fills up and there's no way for it to get away. So, whenever he parked it on an incline, it just poured out what was there. It's not leaking very much. It wasn't very low. But plastic intake, it's got an aluminum runner over the top in the front that leaked down into that valley and filled it up. You can put gaskets on it. They probably won't hold. So we just go ahead and get the entire intake. They have it in stock. It is such a common problem. So let's get after it. First things first is you reach down there, right there, and get it draining. That way it can be draining while you're doing stuff on top. Okay, now to make this job easier, it's not a have to, but I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to pull the cooling fan off. It's got a center nut on it, and it's better to do that with a special tool that goes on the hair hammer. But you can do it with a wrench, with a hammer. Knock it loose, spin this thing off, and then we'll pull this shroud out of here, pull the air tube off, get everything out of the way. And I'm going to pull the belt. Of course, you got to do that. Pull the belt and pull the alternator out of there. There is a tube that sits in the center and goes back underneath the intake. I know that is leaking right there. I know that for a fact. But I don't know how much it's leaking. So I'm going to check that tube and make sure the O-rings down there are not leaking before I down the system. I've already got the thing drained down there, but I'm going to air the system up and make sure we don't have an extra leak down there. You got to pull the intake off to get to that, so we'll just check it before we go too far. Okay, soapy water says there's no leak down there, but over here we're coming out all around this gasket area, around where the plastic meets the aluminum. So, yeah. Check yourself, and when you got this apart, look at the belt. You know, if it's bad, now's the time to replace it because you already got it off. No labor involved. Every once in a while you end up with one that you're going to charge a little extra for labor because they made it a nightmare and you got to pull a motor around or something, but this is not one of them. So it's got a good belt. We're not going to worry about it. Let's get involved taking all this apart. Okay, I'm getting down to it. I had a visitor. We keep getting more and more of them. He hasn't been here very long. But like I say, I showed you that there when I had the thing all pressurized. I got the upper hose pulled. Pull the water line that goes from here to there. The water line on the back side of the heated PCV valve. Pull the hose off the PCV valve. Pull the vacuum off the brake booster, and it's got a bolt back air right there, and then all the tubes and everything, vacuum lines, all that stuff. And I got the O2 or the EGR valve unscrewed right there. Take this one bolt out here, and I'm going to take all these bolts out for the throttle body and pull it as one piece, and I'll have the plug-in for the IAC valve back air. Okay, we're getting down there to the intake. Now everybody asks me, you know, what size bolt is this? What tools do I need for this? I never know. They're always different. This job here, generally, you're going to use 7mm for the coils. There's a lot of 8mm. The throttle body up there has got 4 8mm bolts. And then there, the bracket that holds it has 10mm bolt right here. These are 8mm that holds this bracket right here. 7, 8, and 10, and you can do just about this whole job. And then the EGR tube over there is 1.25 inches. And it was all full to begin with, but you break it down into little segments. Like I pull the fan out of there to have all kinds of room on the front of the engine. Then you pull the alternator out there, now you got all kinds of room in front of the intake. And then you pull the throttle body off and you got all kinds of room on the top. That's manageable now. Right now I'm pulling the coils. Got the 8 coils, I'm gonna pull them out. I got everything unplugged back there. And then we're gonna take the bolts out of the intake and just pop it right up out of there. Now, with the coils out of the way, you can see, you can just pull the electric back and there's plenty of room right there. Now, these 2 spark plug holes are full of water. Coils are all wet. Whenever you have a misfire on one of these and you find water in those front 2 holes, that's number 1 and number 2. You check around that aluminum piece and make sure it's not leaking. Check down in the valley and make sure it doesn't have a whole bunch of antifreeze in it. It came from somewhere. A lot of times it's from, you know, splashing up around the engine and it can't get away, but that's where it'll show up too. Okay, I got all the bolts loose. Pull them out. Sometimes you have to leave them in there because you can't get them in afterwards. But if you can get them out, take them out because they keep catching on stuff. I don't think I can get the back bolt. And you also will find the ones that have a thread still caught. The back one back there is caught underneath the wiring harness. They're sideways. It don't wanna. I'll get it out. I got the fuel lines unhooked back there, and there's a knock sensor that goes in there, but it does not hook into the manifold. It might attach to it, but we'll see. I'm gonna try to pop it up and then pull it forward. Okay, this is one of our leak points, but this sandwich right here, you can see around here, it's been leaking all the way around between this aluminum piece and this plastic right here. That's why we replace it. We're not just trying to replace the whole thing so we don't deal with the gasket. It's because this portion gets warped and it leaks between here and here also. This appears to be most of the leak. Right there is where the gasket is broken. Now, if you're doing this at home in your driveway and you can eat your labor, yeah, you can get a gasket set. You know, guess what? That gasket set is expensive. So when you're having to pay the labor as well, that's why we go ahead and do the whole thing. I have had to replace this manifold several times. They used to have a coolant passage back here that went into the manifold on the 4.6, and that was why they were always bad. Now these have this problem, but like I say, if you're doing it yourself, you can take the risk of putting a gasket set in and be out less than $100 for parts. But like I say, we're not going to do that because we don't want this thing coming back with the same problem again. We're putting a new thermostat in it because we're already there. Now we're just going to change over our fuel system to the new manifold. We're using a Dorman 615-188 as a replacement. Comes with a bunch of hardware. Oh, it comes with a new thermostat. We can send that back and we'll get it free. Now this thing does not have standard framed intake manifold gaskets. It has O-rings in it. If you have to replace them again, you'll have to remember that. And I've run into that before while doing engine replacements. You have to double check to make sure that you've got an aftermarket or an OE intake. The holes where you torque down, right there, where you torque down the coils, the coil screws are plastic screws instead of threaded bolts. And they've got a different style fastener here. So remember that. A little bit, because they're a little bit different, this little muffler insulation thing doesn't fit. All the stuff's hollowed out of it anyway, because it's been a mouse house for quite a while. This is a lot narrower, so they're just gonna have to deal with a little bit of noise. That webbing is a lot taller. It doesn't fit anyway. It's sad, but that's how you deal with aftermarket parts. There are various places, like this bolt hole here, these bolt holes here. That's why they came with extra screws. These two here, there's something to do with that aftermarket kit that he's got, and they didn't bolt to anything. Actually, yeah, they did. I think they bolted the throttle cables. So I will have to take these off and reuse them if I need them. Look it all over when you've got it apart, because the last thing you want to do is throw it away and then have to go retrieve it out of the dumpster. And then if somebody has picked up the dumpster because you pulled it apart that night, threw everything away, and then came back the next morning and went to put it back together, they've dumped the dumpster, and then oh shoot, well, now you're screwed. So keep your parts until the vehicle leaves. I know in a big shop that's going to be a problem, but yeah, especially a do-it-yourselfer. This is something you'll run into whenever you do a project and you have to get delayed and go to another project for a while, or you get distracted watching YouTube videos for a few weeks. You gotta make sure you look it over and make sure that you've got all the parts that you took off. Okay, I got this thing all cleaned up, and I sucked the pond out of the center and got the mouse house out of it that was all packed in there. That was not fun, but it's done with some help from a shop vac. Okay, intake is reinstalled. Bolts are all torqued. Now, there might be a sequence to it, but mainly you just torque from center, work your way forward, and then do the back. I mean, kind of in a spiral pattern. Main thing is that it's even. 18 inch-pounds, first step, 18 foot-pounds, the second step. We're dropping in the thermostat right now. It came with the kit. You drop it in there, you put the O-ring around here. Now, what I do is I take some sealant and put it around this edge. Not much. You shouldn't even see it coming out, but just enough to take up any imperfections, because this taper right here is supposed to push the O-ring out to the outside and seal it. Sometimes it does, but it always does if you put just a freckle of sealant on there. You see there? Just a little bit. And the jiggle valve, I always put it in towards the front, because usually the engine is tilted up just a little bit in the front. That way it gets most of the air out. Okay, the intake's all back on, torqued up. I reached down inside and blew a bunch of brake clean down in each one of the holes. Now that I've got, the intake blocked off with the intake. Sprayed some brake clean down in there and blew all the holes out where the spark plugs go. I did the same with the coils, blew out the boots, cleaned them off, blew them out again. Now we're gonna put a dab of dielectric grease inside each boot and put the coils back on there and start getting everything plugged back in like it's supposed to, and then we'll drop on the throttle body and get that all hooked up. Okay, got the throttle body on, got all the electrical hooked back up, all the vacuum hooked back up, throttle cable back on, belts back on. The only thing I don't have on is the upper radiator hose, but I want to wait till I get the fan and shroud and all that kind of stuff back in, because this is in the way. I got the EGR tightened back up over there, and the DPFE hoses hooked up. Got to make sure pay attention to where they go. This has got a couple of bleed tubes that some of them might not have, because this has a heated PCV valve, which is, it's there. I don't know Well, they've done it for years without, but oh well. Let's cut that out. Okay, we're all back together here. Got all the air tubes back on that go to this air tube, idle air control and all that. Got it plugged back in, all the wiring plugged back in. The shroud and the fan back on, the cover back on, the jack rod back on. Now we're going to fill it up with antifreeze, double check everything for leaks, and test drive. Okay, test drive went well. We look dry. Dry as a bone underneath there. And we're up on coolant. It's right there between the lines. I'll top it off before it leaves. But drove out good and looks good to go. So like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell notification, share it all around. We'll talk to you later.